two folks who know about the inertia of Washington, former Council of Economic Advisors Chairman Jason Furman. He's now at Harvard's Kennedy School, and former Congressional Budget Office Director Douglas Holtz-Eakin is with us. He's now president of the American Action Forum. Good morning to both of you. I will start with you, Jason.
Morning.
You know the numbers better than anybody. What do you think can actually get done through executive actions?
On the spending side, very little. On the regulatory side, probably quite a lot. But even there, it takes patience. You need to sort of dot your I's, cross your T's, or it's not going to get done.
So when we look back, now they've set a date, as you know, July 4th, 2026, for when this project is supposed to be completed, if you will. If we were to sort of project out and we were to meet on that day, Independence Day no less, do you think that they would have achieved this $2 trillion goal?
I'm very skeptical. The spending cuts are actually well known. There's a bunch of career staff at OMB. By the way, they are career staff. They're so-called government bureaucrats. They work really hard. They're really knowledgeable. They know where all the spending cuts are. There's people throughout these agencies that know. The problem is that members of Congress don't want to do it because it's coming out of something that they care about. Some of it's a little bit harder than you'd think. And so the only way DOGE, I think, could help on the spending side is if it provided cover for the types of efficiencies that everyone's already aware of and would like to do. But it's really that political cover that could matter. But by the way, if it also just slashes and burns, it's not gonna work.
So, Doug, what kind of cover do you think they can provide, and what kind of numbers do you think are realistic here?
Well, I want to agree with Jason. I mean, it's one thing to improve the efficiency of the government and to reduce costs, and no one should oppose that. But it's another thing to completely reshape the size and scope of the federal government. That's what they're promising. They don't have the tools to do it. And so I think we're looking at tens of billions of dollars of savings. That would be great. But $2 trillion is simply not realistic. And they can provide some political cover. I mean, the precedent for DOGE is the Grace Commission back in the Reagan administration. And one of the things that went on in the Grace Commission is that the agencies went to the commission and said, hey, you should order us to do X, Y, and Z, because those need done, and we've not been able to get Congress to agree. So if they can identify those things, highlight them, they are well situated to put some pressure on Congress to clean some things up. That'd be a good outcome.
So what kind of stuff would you put on that list? I mean, for example, would you start means testing Social Security? Do you think they could provide cover for that? That would have some impact, I would imagine, on the real big numbers.
So that would have a real impact. I mean, I think one of the things that I've noticed so far is they seem obsessed with the head count. But Social Security is not an expensive program because it has a lot of employees. It's because it sends out a lot of checks. And Medicare is expensive not because it has a lot of employees, because it sends out a lot of checks. If they, in fact, identify ways to improve the checks, the actual spending programs, and get the president to back them, because it's not going to happen without that, and they get Congress to go along, that would be an enormous accomplishment. I guess that's not happened for, 20 years since President Bush tried, and so I'm skeptical they can pull it off, but that would be an amazing outcome.
Jason, one of the things that they mentioned actually in that op-ed in the Journal last week is this idea that they were going to go after stuff that they said either was unconstitutional or was not really intended by Congress. One of the things they cited was the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which I thought was sort of an unusual example, not because it's not something that people don't debate the merits of funding necessarily, but because that was something that was created effectively by Congress back in '67, and that budget is effectively authorized by Congress every 2 years. And so what are the things on the list that you think that they might start to look at that realistically they could shift? Or maybe it's a political cover, by the way, for ending the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is about a $500 some odd million project every 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a trivial part of the budget. First of all, I mean, the notion of efficiency is the idea that you can get the same output at lower cost. There's some savings in the government from efficiency, but most of the savings are deciding that certain output is not worth the cost. So as Doug was just saying, means testing Social Security, that might be worth doing, but that's not efficiency. You're going to get less money to some people. That's how you're going to save money. That's where the budget conversation needs to go at some point. And it's how do we do a combination of spending cuts tax increases, make it a bipartisan compromise, and go at the big stuff rather than, whittle around the edges of these little things. And by the way, I mean, so far they haven't done their homework. Vivek Ramaswamy put out a list and said, let's get rid of everything with an expired authorization, everything that's not authorized by Congress. Well, you know what the biggest thing in that is? Veterans benefits, veterans health care. His $500 billion of savings would have eliminated all support for veterans. Now, I don't think he means that, but that's just indicative of how sloppy he's been so far and how much harder it's going to get when he really tries to dig in and understand these numbers in a way that right now, frankly, I don't think he does.
What kind of people do you think should be brought around the table? Because one of the things they're trying to do, from what I understand, is bring people from outside of government. The idea being that people who are already inside the tent are I don't know if they're deep state, but they're too close to the action. You need fresh eyes. Apparently, Mark Andreessen is trying to help them with some of the recruiting efforts. We've heard that people like Travis Kalanick, who used to run Uber, and Bill Ackman and others have been engaged in certain ways. What kinds of people, in your mind, should be on this quote-unquote volunteer council?
Oh, I know who you're asking, but I mean, I would do a combination of people from outside the government, but also people with a lot of government experience. People who worked for DOGE at the Congressional Budget Office, people who work at the Office of Management and Budget. You know, a lot of the Pentagon savings I know about came from the deep state within the Pentagon. They'd have like a helicopter carrier that they really didn't want, didn't think they could deploy, but it would be made in some critical senator's state and they'd want to get rid of it. There's a lot of expertise and knowledge within the government itself. Combine that with outside if you actually want to get something done, rather than just having, we got rid of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and find some program at NIH to make fun of. I mean, you can do that all day long. That's great politics. If you want to save real money and improve the government, you need a combination from outside and inside.
Doug, you want to be on this group? You could get enlisted.
So, Andrew, I just want to make a couple of points on that. I mean, there are places where they could really do some improvements. So think of the Department of Education and the FAFSA rollout. 5 years of preparation, they can't even deploy it effectively. That's literally indefensible. And so if you want to bring the tech giants in and bring some managerial expertise to those efforts, great. That's long overdue. On the other hand, businessmen often misunderstand the goals of government. So we don't try to minimize costs in the government. We have contracts which are set aside for veterans, set aside for minorities, for women-owned businesses. That's not an exercise in getting the cheapest contract. That's other goals. And they often come in with the notion they can wipe those out. That's not going to happen.
Jason, Doug, it is a longer conversation, and I hope we get an opportunity to continue it, and I imagine we will be talking a lot more about this. So I want to thank you both this Monday morning. Thanks.